Hey y'all. There appears to be a little trouble in paradise. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to keep this video very short and sweet. And this is specifically about because, I'm just a civilian out here. I'm just a human on earth with perspectives and opinions. And the plus side on not being a billionaire mogul, yes, is that, I don't have to worry about my perspectives um fucking up the government, or I don't know, hopefully, maybe, possibly, no, whatever. Anyway, so first, just start this by saying I have no loyalty to any party because I'm independent and I see issues with both sides. So if you feel away, feel away. um just because, I mean, for a long time I've grown up leaning towards the liberal side of things. However, energetically, I don't know, there's just some things that them liberals be doing. I don't know, liberals be kind of mean, and I'm just not here for it. And the Republicans are too. I mean, with politics, is the name of the game, but I don't know. Whatever. All right, so here's the thing. I try my best to consume both sides of content, whether it's content that leans more conservative and leans more liberal, just to get a fair scope of what's said. And what's very interesting about that is that if you listen to both sides of media, you would think that we have two different, completely different governments, right? Like, we could just simply start on the perspectives of Doge, right? If you listen to a lot of the liberal media, you would think that Doge is a complete failure. It's a terrible, worst thing ever. But if you listen to a lot of conservative media, you would hear a lot of like praise and, just like positive things and thanks, especially with like Elon's departure from it. And a lot of people are like, oh, thank you so much for giving this time and energy into, cutting out the waste and abuse and this and that. And and it's interesting. It's interesting seeing both sides of the media and seeing two completely different like tones, right? Um, Interesting. And for me, like, I will say this as a brief opinion about it. When it comes to Doge, I think the concept was well ended, turned out to be more challenging than expected because with Elon the charge with that and him coming from a space of entrepreneurship where he's the one that's in control and it's kind of like his world that he's creating. But then when you step into political world and you realize like, yeah, things are and the same things that he may have been able to do in his own spaces, we might not be able to do in this particular space. And as for like the criticism, they were like, "Oh, you were supposed to get rid of $2 trillion of waste, and you only did however many, like 100 billion. That's not even enough." Like, I mean, my thing is like, he only had the job for like 2 months. Okay, maybe a little bit more than that, but I'm like, regardless, like, I feel like however much money it's supposed to be, that's not enough time to get all of that done. I feel like the whole point of residency, like, you have 4 years of a presidency, right? I don't know what the time crunch was, but I feel like whatever it was probably wasn't going to be enough either way, but I mean, to handle as much as they did, I do feel like at least it was something better than nothing. Then again, there's going to be people who criticize, like, jobs lost and, certain aids and organizations cut. I mean, we even seen a video from Neil deGrasse Tyson, discussing some of the cuts to NASA, which, I thought was interesting because I'm like, Elon's the space guy, but at the same time, I don't know. I feel like the from my perspective, being a citizen of the US and civilian in these things, I'm not in politics. What do I know? I mean, well, I was in a debate club. I did learn a bit about politics. However, my whole thing is like, okay, so if you complain about the fact that they didn't get to a trillion or 2 trillion or however many trillions of debt, or elimination, if they were to get to that amount of money, there would be a lot of cuts in a lot of different departments, and there would be a lot more complaints than what people were already complaining about. And then at the same time, if they didn't make the cuts that they did make, then it would be the complaint of, oh, y'all didn't cut enough. Y'all didn't save anything. There's still so much. So it's like a double-edged sword. It's like either way, it's like in order to make the cuts necessary to save, there's going to be, you know, some there's going to be complaints about where the cuts are made and how it's done. And, to take the time to really like try to evaluate every single aspect, every single department. I don't know. It's kind of like the best way I can like think about it as an analogy is like, say if you're like cleaning a room, right? Say you're cleaning a room and you know that you got to get rid of things. And some things may have like sentimental value. And, if you really sit there and try to like go through every object, you're going to come up with reasons to keep certain things that you really just need to let go of, right? And sometimes you just need to like just say, all right, we're gonna go through this and eliminate this, and then it's done. I'm not even going to go through all the stuff, because if I do, then I'm gonna find reasons to try to keep this or make excuses to say like, oh, I shouldn't throw this away because this I had this since I was like, I don't know, two, but it's like, okay, but is it functional? Is it doing anything? Is it adding value? And then that could be debatable. I don't know. That's just how it kind of reminds me of when I feel like I'll be cleaning my room and I'm like, look, I just need to just toss this stuff. Like, I don't need to keep this in my life. This is holding up space. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I feel like that's kind of how I feel about it. But whatever. That's not what I was trying to get to. But that was a fraction of a thought, hence the title. Um, Now something that stuck out to me when I first was just kind of like following, what was going on with this cabinet was the fact that the cabinet meetings were televised. I'm not sure if other administrations have done that before. I have to like go back and check. But I thought that was interesting. And I also thought that that was going to be an issue when it comes to transparency and having genuine conversations about what actually needs to be fixed in the government. Because quite frankly, let's be real. If not only cameras being on, but if it being televised, who's really going to be in the cabinet meeting? Like, I haven't watched the whole way through because I don't know. I'm just, look, I tried and I'm pretty sure I fell asleep. And I don't know how people in that meeting didn't fall asleep, but whatever. I just feel like a televised meeting just breeds for conversations centered around ass kissing, quite frankly. And who is really going to be the person to tell Trump, actually, I feel like this is wrong? Who's going to say that with the cameras off, let alone with the cameras on? You know what I mean? And, most of the clips that I've seen of those meetings are everybody going around the table saying, Trump, thanks for everything that you're doing. We appreciate all that you do. And, and sure, there might be people who genuinely feel that way. But let's be real. I don't think that, I don't know. I want to be of this. There are things that politically I don't like that Trump does. However, I feel like in his mind, he genuinely wants to help make America great, whatever that looks like. And, as a Black woman, I just feel like that statement can't be one that includes Black people, just because when has America ever been great for us? We're just now getting around to things being a little bit better. But that's a whole nother conversation in another time. But I feel like in his mind, he's genuinely trying to do work that he feels will help America. I don't think it's his intention to intentionally fuck up the country. Um, I don't agree with a lot of his methods. But I do think that he's well intentioned. And, like, for example, with the tariffs, I know the whole conversation around tariffs is kind of crazy because it goes up and down and back and forth, and a lot going on. But I feel like he's operating tariffs business negotiations because he comes from the space of business, and it's having all these crazy effects on the economy. But I feel like he's genuinely trying to negotiate their terms for America. Now, you can debate all day about whether it's working or not, whatever. With that said, when it comes to these cabinet meetings, I feel like the is that you can't tell him about himself. You can't criticize him without it going left, you know. And with when you're a person like that, it's easy to have yes men around you, and it's easy to fall into having to be a yes man just because you don't want to rock the boat. Because if you rock the boat, you might get kicked out the boat, and they'll watch you drown, metaphorically. And I could only imagine what a work environment like that would be. Because I know my mouth is reckless when it comes to speaking the truth, or at least what feels to be true to me from my perspectives and opinions. And I try my best to not be, I don't know. I don't know if I try not to be offensive. I just try to be honest. And sometimes honesty hurts, but it's necessary. And it's not my intention to hurt people. My intention is to really just say the things that should be said, you know. And I feel like we're in a day and age where we are tiptoeing around transparency, and I get irritated with that. So I say the things that I feel like people should be saying, and it shouldn't be uh oh my God, finally someone saying the things that we want to say. Or like it shouldn't be that. Like the norm, the default should be an environment of honesty, even if it's uncomfortable. Because let's be real, in order to grow and change and evolve for the better in any capacity, you have to have uncomfortably honest conversations and address real issues, you know. Especially when it comes to the government and the well-being of and our allies. And it's just, yeah, I can only imagine what that space be like. And I've said that before. I've said that out, probably just like out loud, thinking if my life were like the Truman Show, maybe they broadcasted it. But yeah, and I was just like, I think it's interesting that these cabinet meetings are televised. And I'm like, I haven't watched it all the way through, but for anybody who has, have you ever seen a moment in these cabinet meetings where anyone's actually like challenged Trump and was like, look, I don't like this idea. I don't think this is a good approach. I don't think this is a good method. And not to like undermine him, but just to present a different perspective, because debates are necessary. And Trump just appears to be a person where it's like it's his way or the highway. And you can't debate him or you can't challenge him without it being a whole thing of like, oh, you're attacking me. And it's like, it doesn't have to be an attack. It could be just a critique on what's being discussed here. And You need people like that. You need a team like that. You need a team of people who are going to challenge you and keep it real with you, and, you know, address the hard truths. Even if it's something that's a stain on your brand, or um something that maybe doesn't put a good light on you. And it's like, okay, you have to honestly look at the problem, and look at it for all its, you know, all its ugliness and what it is. And, and really be able to say, okay, this is the problem. Now what's the solution? Yeah, the problem is uncomfortable, I'm sure. But that's why it's a problem, right? But either we continue to perpetuate the problem, or break down what can be solutions to these issues, rather than just like trying to put a band-aid on a wound that probably needs like stitches or something like that. I don't know. Just an analogy. Don't think too much into it. You know, like I said, this is purely political. I'm not, there's no like read between the lines, deeper meaning, at least not intentionally. I'm literally just addressing politics on the surface as a surface level conversation. Um, yeah, and I just feel like it must be challenging to have to be a part of a team and follow leadership in that way, where you can't really challenge um your leader, and you just have to kind of go along with everything. Like, Trump was right about everything hats. Is that the case? Who is? Nobody is. Like, nobody. Well, it's like, nah, let me chill. Um, but like, yeah, my whole point is like, nobody's perfect. People fuck up, and people make mistakes. But it's like, okay, are you the type of person that tries to fix the mistake? Are you the type of person that even acknowledges the mistake, or like just just act like, what mistake? There are no mistakes, And I couldn't be in no space like that. I know I couldn't be on nobody's cabinet like this, you know. Um, yeah, so I can only imagine, and I know there's certain ways that you got to play the game when you're in those levels and you're in those rooms, and I just don't be beat to be playing these games respectfully. Yeah, but like I said, I'm a civilian. So, I don't gotta think about, all right, how this relationship is going to affect my multi-million dollar corporation, or how, you know, if I honestly give my perspective about this, how this might ruin a potential relationship with someone that, is of importance, or in a position of power, or whatever the case may be. Like, I get that that's a whole thing in itself too. um I don't know. It's just certain ways that that game is played at that level that I just know that I just don't know if I would participate in that way. Okay, that's one perspective. Another thing that I wanted to say in regards to that, there was another point that I had in mind. Okay. I have another point. I'm not sure if I want to discuss it here. Um okay, two things. Okay, all right. I am gonna mention this, but I'm not gonna like elaborate too much on it. One thing. I would Part of me. Okay, all right. How do I want to word this? even though I feel that in Elon's recent tweets, we're seeing him be able to express a little bit of the frustration that it might have been to work in that space. I wish we were left out of that group chat. And I know some people are here for the mess. Normally I would be. But honestly, some people might be upset about this take. I was kind of happy that, under the assumption, because I don't know what all be going on behind the scenes. I don't know. I feel like I was in my mind, okay, all right. So I was thinking him leaving on good terms with the administration is a good move because, like, in that press conference, to continue to be a friend and advisor would be good. Um, you know, and I'm sure, I mean, but it's like that man got like 20 different companies and, and a family and all these things that, and then trying to get to another planet, like that's a lot to be dealing with. And then, like, dabbling into politics, like, who has the time to do all of that? And not be stressed out, So, I mean, I can only imagine. And then, like, the demons that are probably lurking. Let me chill. Okay, this is not a spiritual conversation, but it could be. Anyway, because like I said, I'm a civilian, so I ain't gotta do the whole, like, speaking in political ebonics, but whatever. Um, so I can only imagine that's probably a lot. In the beginning of man's conversation, at the beginning of the presidency, everybody was like, "Oh, they're gonna fall out. There's gonna be this whole power trip and this and that." And I was kind of hoping that that wouldn't happen, you know. And I know the liberals are probably gonna chew me up for it. Take a number. Um, there's already a line long enough, so whatever. But honestly, like, I was hoping that there wouldn't be a fallout, and if there was disagreements, these are his frustrations that we're seeing are things that he should be able to communicate with these people behind closed doors. And I feel, which I was just the point that I was just making, is that, when you have publicized cabinet meetings and, everything is on public display, of course you have to put on this act and, and keep it cute and professional for the media. But when you get to the hard points, yeah, like, we see that being discussed a little bit, but I feel like we're seeing it discussed in a way where it's more theatrical than it is getting to solutions. And I feel like there's people around Trump that genuinely want to be there and want to help the country. And, you could debate whether certain people's political stances and stuff. And I'm not saying I agree with everything that they do, but I do feel like there's people who, in their own minds, genuinely want to help the American people, but maybe can't do that how they would normally want to because of how communication is set up in this administration. And I was hoping that if there was any issues, that they can handle that behind closed doors in ways where we don't have to see it publicly, because that's how issues should be resolved, and if there were issues and, again, that could be handled that way, because I feel it would have been a really good move to leave the White House on a high note. Because of course, like, leaving on good terms, you're able to, you know, return back, if need be. And, and I thought that it was good that, and even in, like, the last, like, cabinet meeting and And, in the press conference and all of that stuff, Trump was saying, like, we'd like to have Elon back. If he wants to or whatever. But he has his companies to run and all those things. And I was like, oh, look at that. How sweet. How cute. Oh my gosh. Because I mean, you want to leave a space where the door is open for you to be able to return, you know? And that's, again, kind of like another analogy that's not related, but hopefully you understand the point that I'm trying to make. It's like when you have a favorite TV show and before you get to a point where there's just random seasons that is just like, okay, these writers are just trying to milk out the check versus leaving or ending a show on a high note and having like a really good ending. And, and so it's like, okay, there's no cliffhangers, there's no like plot holes, and it's just a good solid ending rather than you just trying to like milk out the episodes. And it's just like this plot line don't even make no sense, this character wouldn't even have a relationship with this person or whatever it is. Mind you, this is an analogy, all hypothetical. I'm talking about television, but you know what I mean. And basically the point of like having a graceful exit, like a solid end game, to for a better way of saying that. um yeah, I was hoping for that for him. And yeah, again, and being in a space where you have to like keep your emotions and your perspectives um to the vest, and then finally, like once you exit, you can breathe and finally say all the things that you want to say about your boss that's been pissing you off. I don't know. I don't like that for them. I don't know. That's just my opinion on that. Okay, but with that said, I mean, you know, now that we're seeing that there's probably things that, may have frustrated or irritated Elon in the midst of that space. I'm pretty sure, and the thing is, okay, not even just about him. This is something that I've said about Caroline too, the press secretary. I'm like, they, child, they be having her up there. And I know that there are times where she might not agree with the messaging that she has to say, but that's her job. Her job is to stand 10 toes down on everything that the administration does, even if she may personally have a different opinion or a different perspective. But her job is to, relay the message of Trump, whether she agrees with it or not. They might have different discussions behind the scenes. Probably not. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm just saying. And, and she has to deliver a message to the press, standing 10 toes down on whatever he does. And I'm sure that there's people who who may disagree with certain things. And I don't know. I just feel like sometimes when I be watching her up there, I'm like, girl, I feel for you. Because you probably don't even want to say this, but you up there and that's your job. Your job is to push whatever message that they told you to push out. And you probably, yeah, nah. And the thing is, okay, in watching Scandal, yes, I know Scandal's a fictional show, but it's a lot of stuff that be happening in Scandal that we're seeing happening in real time right now, in more ways than one. However, when during like the later seasons, when Abby was working at the White House and she was the press secretary for Fitz, what they were saying in the Oval, because they were able to keep it real on that show, and they would like tell each other off, but it was usually out of like love and respect, and really for America and American people. Even though a lot of the side quest stuff was crazy, but you know, there's times where she would go off on Fitz, and it's like, I know that this is what you want to stand for, but you shouldn't, this bill, we shouldn't be doing this like this. And, of course, regardless, she has to go in front of the podium and address the people like, this is Fitz's stance, this is his message, and this is what we're doing. Even though 5 minutes prior, she was in the room going off on him because she knew it was a crazy deal to do or whatever is going on in foreign affairs. But because she's the press secretary, she has to stand on that. I'm sure that's like that in real life. But like I said, with this particular administration, one of the flaws of Trump is that you can't be honest with him without it being a situation where he might take it offense. He may take it offense and put you out of your position. So that's a point. And okay, and my point in that is I feel like that's a general thing regardless of whether it's Elon or other people. And so with that said, that there's probably people who because you're a part of the administration and say not only do you have to the two points that I'm getting at is that there's probably frustration in not being able to express how you feel within the cabinet and within the administration in private settings. And then publicly, because of association, you're forced to be in this space where you have to publicly appear as if you stand by everything that's being done in the administration. And I feel I see through that shit. And because I'm like, let's for this one particular example that I want to say, you mean to tell me I'm just not even going to say it like that. I'm just going to say it how I see it and just what would make sense to me. If I was using my own intellect and spidey senses, I would say, and now I could be wrong, this is an assumption, but I feel Elon probably does not agree with this beef with Harvard, especially with foreign students, because was he not a foreign student from South Africa who went to Penn University, which happened to be around the corner from my college? Hey, shout out to Drexel U. But because literally America having a foreign exchange student program is what provided him an education and put him in a position to be the successful entrepreneur mogul he is now. So you mean to tell me that he agrees with what's going on with Trump and Harvard? Probably not. Probably not. I'm sure he feels a way about that. But I don't know that man personally. Hey Elon, if you happen to see this, I don't know him personally, but from what I do know from the information that you can find on Google, I would find it hard to believe that he would agree with the beef against foreign exchange students, not just at Harvard, but anywhere. But if it starts and it can happen at Harvard, it could happen anywhere. And that literal availability to be an exchange student from a different country to come to America, and follow the American dream, which worked out well for him. I mean, from what we see on the outside looking in, we don't know what's really tea behind the scenes. Well, I don't know. Some of y'all might know a little bit more than me, but I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure that that's not something that he would agree with. And if it is, I wouldn't believe that. I don't know. And my point in saying that is that, okay, so let's just go down that road hypothetically. So say if I'm right, and I feel that I am, Elon doesn't agree with the back and forth against Harvard University in this fight against exchange students, because literally your main guy that's the, special government employee, wouldn't even be here if it weren't for that program. I wonder if he's had the opportunity to be able to voice that to Trump and there not be some type of a blowback or some type of an argument or whatever. Because what does a mature conversation about the exchange student program look like? What does that conversation sound like? And you know what? And not to like, I know some people wouldn't want me to give grace to Trump. I'm gonna give him like a sliver of grace, just a little bit. Only because there are instances where I can tell that he tries to, maybe it's public. Maybe it's a public thing. Maybe behind the scenes, we don't know. Maybe it's a whole nother thing. But I feel like now I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I'll just say it briefly in like 2 seconds. Okay. Even the whole thing about like the white South African farmers being like the whole genocide against white folks. To be frank, I feel like one of the main reasons why he even cares is because Elon's there. And and that's his guy, or at least so we think. And and maybe, I don't know. I'm not saying that this is something that Elon brought up, or maybe he heard about it and he's like, "Oh, we can't be having that because my guy's from South Africa." So, yeah, he happens to be white. So we got to make sure the white people in South Africa are good. That's my assumption of what his thinking it probably is. And I only say that to say that that's probably an example of maybe one or a few times where he takes into consideration the plight of or someone in a foreign space, right? Okay, with that in consideration. However, it kind of like it's like a paradoxical thing where it's like, okay, if we're going to be considerate in this one space, out of consideration of the fact that your guy Elon's from South Africa, but you have to also keep in mind too about the foreign exchange students. Now, I know I feel like a lot of that stems from the protest around Palestine and Israel, and that's kind of like the excuse to like go after these students. But I don't know. I'm not feeling that. And in my heart of hearts, I feel like that's probably something that behind the scenes, like I said, I'm assuming because I don't work at the White House, but I'm assuming that that's probably something Elon wouldn't agree with. But I don't know. I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am when it comes to that particular issue. However, anyway, those are the main points that I wanted to get at as it pertains to the politics. I'm look, don't try to read between the lines. I'm not saying anything intentionally of like, oh, there's a deeper meaning. What she's actually trying. No, I'm not as good at that as you know y'all be. I just say what I be feeling, and I say that out loud. And when I try to do that whole like Jedi mind trick shit, the wrong things be happening, and that's not what I be trying to do. I really look. The Chronicles of Being a Black Girl in America. I feel like I'm constantly in circumstances and situations where I say one thing and it's interpreted completely different than what I'm trying to imply. And I'm like, I don't know how not to be forthright in what I'm saying. And if I try not to be forthright, then but I don't want to be like too vulnerable of a thing. And like, I don't know, it's a lot. Anyway, Yeah. So that's my opinion. Well, that's a fraction of it. I have other thoughts. I have more detailed perspectives um about other situations and circumstances, but I said this was a fraction of it. I just, be elaborating. But the two main things that I wanted to get at was, you know, how I feel like people probably, but specifically Elon, because he happens to be the main one publicly leaving. Um, I feel like people behind the scenes probably don't get the chance to voice their opinions. And so now we're publicly seeing certain things. And I'm sure that there's people who disagree with certain things that Trump is doing, but maybe not feel comfortable or able to express that. And I think that sucks. And, and that's a recipe for disaster if that doesn't change. Like, there has to be some type of ability to address the hard conversations in any type of space of leadership. There, you have to be able to critique and hold your leader accountable and challenge them and debate them respectfully, maturely, um, you know, without animosity or like being like condescending, And I don't know. I don't see that being a thing in this administration, and I can only imagine that probably stresses someone out. Um, and yeah, I don't know. And I know like there's a lot of people who are like hating right now and probably don't care and be like, oh, that's what their person is and this and that. And I try not to be in that space. I be trying to like, I don't know. I guess for me personally, well, not personally, because like I said, I don't know that man in real life. I've never met him. However, you know, even though I will be honest and say, upon learning of him being a part of this administration, definitely shifted my perspective. But, there was a part of me that, admired the work that Elon does because, he's a space guy. I like space. Maybe. Maybe in a past life I've been there. I don't know. Um, I've kind of like, and it's funny as I've been like doing this live stream, like the moon is kind of like, well, I mean, I can't see it right now, but like the moon is kind of like been back in the background and it's kind of like had like this orangish, like reddish tint, and I'm like, Mars, is that you? But it's not. Mars is a bit further, but yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Like, okay, my tangent. I digress. Yeah, so like like I don't know. I've in my mind like I've had like this like parasocial relationship where I'd be like competing with him, even though like I'd have to be a white man to get like even like a sliver of the opportunities that this, this man has. I don't know. This country is crazy, but you know the ambition is what inspires me. You know, and normally I would call it white man ambition, but he happens to be the main white man, the richest white man. Not that that's the thing that matters, but that just happens to be the fact. Um, and I just feel like white men could just like move in the world where they can just kind of like conquer and acquire and, you know, just go for the things that they want in life. And, and I'm not saying that that doesn't come with challenges. I'm sure it does. But it's just different when you are of a different ethnicity and gender. Um, and I would try to be the type of person that doesn't let that hold me back. Like, yeah, I'm a black woman, and I know that there's systemic things that are built in how this country is structured to hold me back. Um, However, I try not to let that deter my own personal ambitions anyway. Um, and and that was one of the things about him that would inspire me. However, um, however, transition word. Um, I wasn't crazy about him joining this administration. I wasn't. I was one of those angry liberals that was, oh my God, we hate Elon Musk. Not literally. I don't know that man enough to hate him. Um, but I don't know. I feel like in recent months, there's definitely been a shift in my perspective about certain things. Mainly because, like, okay, I know that being like in the mindset of, I know that there's some people that don't want this administration to do well. Like they complain about the administration, but I know, like, okay, if the administration was actually doing stuff that you wanted, would you give them the credit of it? Probably not. I mean, there are some people who probably would, but I feel like even when you do point out the negatives, there's folks who lean like liberally who will make excuses of saying like, oh, this only worked out because of this and this and that. And it's like, okay, it's like, do y'all want the government to be successful or not? Like, like at this point, I feel like, okay, even if the people that you wanted to win didn't win, this is the administration that we have. So even though there are probably political things that and values and stances that we disagree with, the goal shouldn't be to want this administration to do bad. You should want this administration to do good. And so when I try to like look at it that way, it shifted my perspective. And that's why I say, like, I try to look at both sides of media. Like, what are the conservatives saying versus what are the liberals saying, and I just kind of like form my own perspective and opinions from that. But I try to look at situations as fairly as I can. And yeah, there are things that I disagree with. There are things that I'm not crazy about, but at the same time, like, I will give credit where credit is due. If I feel like something's going well, or if I feel like, okay, I can see where this person is coming from and where maybe what this political approach might be. So I don't know, that kind of like shifted my perspective about the administration. Like, again, there are things that I still completely disagree with, like this approach with ICE and, targeting people who are citizens. I don't like that. I never liked it at the beginning of this presidency, and I still don't stand for that. Um, and, there are still a lot of things that I'm not crazy about politically. But at the same time, I don't think that I don't want this administration to do bad. Like, I still want to be hopeful that there can be good done here, but it does start with accountability, and it does start with calling out the things. So yeah, on this little platform of mine, via YouTube, I say the things that I feel should be said, and I don't say it with malice. I try to just be transparent. And I feel like that's what this country, government, society, humanity is lacking, is transparency. I feel like it's a lot of beating around the bush. It's a lot of, hidden messages. We like this, we don't like this. It's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of confusion. And I just rather keep it real with you. I'd rather just say what I like, what I don't like. And so there's no confusion. What I meant, what I didn't mean, you know. Um, yeah. So I don't know. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to address and say, as it pertains to um this departure of Elon's. Yeah. I mean, I do think I'll just end by saying this. Again, I do think it's um, you know, it's probably a lot. Like I said, it's probably a lot to not have the space to freely express how you really feel about what's going on in the administration. And then on top of like, everybody like attacking and the protests and part of me like, I mean, I'm here for freedom of speech. Um so yeah, the American people have a right to feel that way. And I can only imagine like behind the scenes, the reasons why people are protesting against you are for stances that you might not even necessarily agree with, but you're just like lumped into it because of association with the administration. So on a publicly, it appears like everything that the administration is doing, like you have to stand by that and say you disagree. And publicly people don't know that, and then even behind the scenes people might not know that because you might not have the freedom to express it. So then like, yeah, you would want to get out of an environment like that. And then like, okay, now that you're out of an environment like that, you get to really say what you want to say. My only thing is, don't ruin a relationship. Challenge the space and say the true things behind the scenes, but be respectfully honest. Because I mean, like, as much as I'd be here for the mess shouldn't be publicized. It should be privately addressed. But, I'm not in politics or anything. I mean, I'm just saying, and especially because there's people who's rooting for this moment, rooting for like the downfall of the bromance or whatever, and I mean, like, and like I said, I don't, either way, I don't care because like, I'm not Republican and I'm not like Democrat either. But I just feel like just for the sake of like, there's probably a lot going on, in the media. Just like keep it cute. Express yourself, but like say the things that you really need to say to the people who need to hear it. Respectfully. And if they can't take it, then whatever. At least you're like walking out the door and you got your companies. And you have things to do and you have spaces that you're in control of where you can control the narrative. But we shouldn't hear this. Not like that. But who am I? I'm just a cat lady from Jersey. Um, yeah. All right, that's it. And I gotta charge my battery, and I'm about to get my workout on. So, with that said, um, this is my extended TED talk on politics, and I hope you all have a good night. And yeah, much love, and hopefully we can have some healing, and in our government. And yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's probably a good time to just kind of like step back. I need to put, um there's a feline on me. I set up my cat lady. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like this is probably a good time to just take some time to yourself. Um Relax, whatever that looks like. Spend time with people who are honest with you, who love and care about you. This is a general message to society. Because there's a lot going on. And, I feel like there's a lot of shifts and changes and evolutions and all. But really like I can imagine things are stressful, and there's ways to try to alleviate that stress, maybe in unhealthy ways. Um, and I would implore people to take better care of themselves. Okay, Angie girl, come on. I want a wire in the way. Um, yeah, take better care of yourself. Eat healthier foods if you can, and work out. You know, which is what I'm about to do. Now I'm not eating the healthiest of foods. I'm trying. I had an apple though. Balance, um, duality. However, um, yeah, that's my word. I hope it's received well. All right, y'all. That's it. All right, I'm about to get up out of here and get my own life and health together. So yeah. All right. I'll talk to you later.